On a hot and humid afternoon in mid-August 2008, a tragic event unfolded in the affluent city of Atlanta, Georgia, shaking the local community to its core. The Thompson family, who lived in a wealthy neighborhood known for its grand homes and tree-lined streets, became the center of a devastating family crisis. The story revolves around William Bill Thompson, his wife Vanessa, and Vanessa's stepson, Darius Johnson. Their lives, which once appeared to be the perfect picture of success and harmony, were about to be forever changed by a dark and unexpected tragedy that would unravel secrets, betrayals, and emotional turmoil. This incident not only shattered their family, but also sent shock waves throughout the community. From the outside, William Bill Thompson appeared to have built the kind of life most people only dream about. A successful real estate developer in his early 50s, Bill was known for his sharp business acumen, generous philanthropy, and commanding presence in the Atlanta business community. He drove luxury cars, hosted elegant galas, and was frequently seen at upscale events with his beautiful wife Vanessa by his side. Vanessa, in her early 40s, was a former model who had seamlessly transitioned into the role of a socialite and philanthropist. With her poised demeanor and graceful charm, she was the envy of many in their elite social circles. Despite being Bill's second wife, she played the part of the elegant matriarch effortlessly, attending charity luncheons, managing the family's public image, and appearing on the covers of local lifestyle magazines. But behind their carefully curated image of success and sophistication, the Thompsons were hiding cracks in the foundation of their marriage. Whispers of tension began circulating among friends and neighbors. Bill, despite his public devotion, had grown increasingly controlling and distant at home, often prioritizing his business over his family. Vanessa, on the other hand, was reportedly growing resentful of living in Bill's shadow, yearning for independence and emotional intimacy that was missing from their relationship. It was during this time that Vanessa's stepson, Darius Johnson, re-entered their lives in a more permanent way. Darius, Bill's son from a previous marriage, had struggled for years to find his place. A 24-year-old aspiring musician, he had a troubled past marked by run-ins with the law, failed relationships, and a rocky relationship with his father. Bill saw Darius as a disappointment, someone who never quite lived up to family name or expectations. Vanessa, however, saw Darius differently. She sympathized with his struggle, related to his feelings of alienation, and began spending more time with him, initially out of desire to support him, but eventually crossing a dangerous line. What began as innocent mentorship soon turned into late-night conversations, long glances, and eventually a secret, illicit affair that neither of them fully anticipated. Their forbidden relationship would become the spark that ignited a deadly fire, a fire that would engulf the Thompson family in scandal, betrayal, and ultimately bloodshed, highlighting that beneath the surface of wealth and respectability, complex and painful truths were hidden. The secret affair between Vanessa Thompson and her 24-year-old stepson, Darius Johnson, quickly escalated from a dangerous infatuation to a full-blown obsession. What started as stolen glances and whispered conversations behind closed doors soon evolved into passionate rendezvous at nearby hotels, and even within the family estate when Bill was away on business trips. They were reckless, emboldened by the thrill of secrecy, and blind to the devastating consequences that loomed just over the horizon. For Darius, the relationship awakened something intense and uncontrollable. He had never experienced the kind of emotional validation Vanessa offered him. She treated him not like the black sheep of the family, but like a man deserving of love and respect, something he had rarely felt in his life, especially from his father. In Vanessa, he saw more than a lover. He saw a savior. And in Darius, Vanessa saw freedom. He was young, impulsive, and eager to please. He made her feel alive again, something Bill hadn't done in years. But the deeper they fell into each other, the more their twisted fantasy clashed with reality. Bill, a man known for his controlling nature, began to notice subtle changes in Vanessa's behavior. She was distracted, often defensive, and had started making excuses to be away from home. Darius, too, had grown more confrontational and distant, avoiding his father and acting with a newfound defiance. Behind the scenes, tension simmered. Vanessa and Darius began talking about a future, one free from Bill's looming presence. But there was a problem. Bill wasn't the kind of man who would ever just step aside. He had power, money, and a fierce need to maintain control over everything in his life, including Vanessa. So the couple began entertaining a dark, desperate idea. What if Bill simply wasn't around anymore? According to prosecutors, it was during this time that the murder plot was first discussed. The details were vague at first, a conversation sparked in a haze of lust and adrenaline, but it quickly evolved into something chillingly real. Darius suggested that Bill could have an accident. Vanessa, emotionally worn down and perhaps manipulated by her lover's intensity, didn't say no. They started planning in secret. Phone records would later show a sudden uptick in late-night calls between them. Hotel receipts, surveillance footage, and text messages painted a picture of two people spiraling into a conspiracy. And while it's unclear who first made the final decision, what is certain is this. They both agreed that Bill had to die. The stage was set. All that remained was to decide how and when they would strike. It was a warm spring evening when the plan was finally put into motion. Bill Thompson had returned home from a business trip, completely unaware that his wife Vanessa and his son Darius, his own flesh and blood, were plotting his demise. The couple had spent weeks preparing, and now everything was in place. The tension in the air was thick as Bill walked into his home for what would be the last time. According to investigators, the murder happened sometime between 9 p.m. and midnight. What we know is chilling. Darius, driven by a lethal mix of passion and resentment, was the one who struck first. He waited for his father in the garage, hiding in the shadows, wearing gloves and carrying a blunt object, believed to be a steel pipe taken from the shed. As Bill entered, Darius ambushed him, striking him repeatedly in the head. There was no struggle, no warning, just brute force and betrayal. The autopsy would later reveal that Bill died from blunt force trauma to the skull. His death was instantaneous. While Darius delivered the fatal blows, Vanessa was not just a passive bystander. She stood upstairs, watching from the window, ensuring no neighbors were around. When it was over, she came down to help clean up. Together, they dragged Bill's body into the basement freezer, wrapped in plastic, his wedding ring still on his finger. The next step was to cover their tracks. They scrubbed the garage clean with bleach, disposed of their bloody clothes, and turned off Bill's phone to avoid location tracking. Vanessa even texted a few of Bill's business contacts using his phone, pretending he had left town early for another trip. It bought them time, but not much. What they hadn't accounted for was Bill's meticulous nature. He kept a strict schedule, and when he missed a morning board meeting without notice, his business partner grew suspicious. Multiple calls went unanswered. By the afternoon of the next day, one of Bill's closest friends requested a welfare check. When police arrived, Vanessa answered the door calmly. She told them Bill had gone out of town unexpectedly, something about a last-minute retreat in the mountains. But officers quickly noticed inconsistencies. Suitcases still in the bedroom, Bill's car in the driveway, and traces of bleach lingering in the air. The garage floor had been scrubbed, but luminol tests would later show large swaths of clean blood. Still, with no body and no direct evidence, authorities couldn't make an arrest. Not yet. The following week, Vanessa and Darius began discussing how to dispose of the body entirely. Their plan was to move it in the middle of the night, dump it in a remote lake, and hope nature would handle the rest. But they didn't get the chance. Before they could act, detectives returned with a warrant. And this time, they weren't leaving empty-handed. In the basement freezer, they found Bill Thompson, wrapped in heavy plastic, his face bruised and frozen in time. Once Bill Thompson's body was discovered in the basement freezer, everything unraveled fast. At first, Vanessa tried to maintain her composure. She told detectives she had no idea how her husband ended up there, claimed she thought he had left for a business trip and never returned. But her story didn't match the physical evidence. Her voice trembled. Her timeline shifted. Investigators saw right through the lies. When questioned separately, Darius cracked. Sitting in the cold, sterile interrogation room, he broke down under pressure. Investigators said it started with small admissions. We had a fight. Then things got out of hand. Eventually, he confessed to everything, but not in the way detectives expected. Darius didn't just confess to murder. He explained the why. The twisted love triangle. the manipulation, the betrayal that ran deeper than blood. According to Darius, Vanessa, his stepmother, had seduced him months before the murder. She told him that Bill was abusive, that she feared for her life, that the only way they could be together was if Bill was gone. She fed him lies day after day until he believed them. Darius painted a picture of a woman who knew exactly how to manipulate. He claimed Vanessa orchestrated everything, picking the day, the weapon, and even rehearsing how he would attack. Darius said he was just a pawn in Vanessa's plan, someone desperate for love and approval. But Vanessa had her own story. She denied everything, claimed Darius had developed an unhealthy obsession with her, said he was the one who made advances, that she rejected him, and he killed his father out of jealousy. He was sick, she told detectives, and I was scared of him. Now, it was a matter of who the jury would believe. Both were charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice. As the investigation deepened, more disturbing details surfaced. Phone records, deleted texts, surveillance footage of Vanessa buying cleaning supplies hours before Bill's death, incriminating internet searches, a clear paper trail. But the most chilling evidence? A handwritten note found in Vanessa's nightstand, a to-do list with chilling tasks. Buy bleach. Destroy Bill's phone. Keep Darius calm. It was all premeditated, cold, calculated, and undeniable. In the end, prosecutors didn't need Darius's full cooperation. They had enough. The prosecution argued that this was more than just a crime of passion. It was a well-planned execution of a husband by his wife and his own son, a twisted betrayal that shocked even the most hardened detectives. The case was heading to trial, but the damage had already been done. A father dead, a family shattered, and a web of deceit thicker than anyone could have imagined. Reporters filled the benches. Cameras were barred from entering, but that didn't stop national media from descending like vultures. Everyone wanted to know, what would Vanessa and Darius say when the spotlight turned on them? The prosecution opened strong. They laid out the case step by step. The affair, the manipulation, the lies, then the ultimate betrayal, murdering Bill Thompson in cold blood and stuffing his body into a basement freezer like discarded trash. They painted Vanessa as a femme fatale, cold, calculated, and ruthless, a woman who used sex and deception to twist the mind of a much younger man. And Darius? They called him a willing accomplice, fully aware of what he was doing. Their evidence was overwhelming. The search history, surveillance footage, the damning to-do list. Forensic evidence matched Bill's blood to the basement walls. Darius's fingerprints were found on the freezer lid. And perhaps most chilling, the audio logs from their baby monitor system. A malfunction had accidentally recorded part of the murder. Muffled sounds, a struggle, and Vanessa's voice whispering, "It's done. Just clean up." Then came the defense. Vanessa's attorneys argued she was a victim. They said she'd been emotionally and physically abused by Bill for years, and Darius had taken matters into his own hands. They tried to show that she never asked for the murder, that she was horrified when she found out. Her face stayed stoic during most of the trial, except when Darius took the stand. The courtroom held its breath. When asked directly if Vanessa had planned the murder, Darius hesitated. Tears welled in his eyes. Then, slowly, he said, "Yes, she told me what to do." Gasps echoed around the courtroom. That was the turning point. The jury took only 2 days to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Vanessa Thompson was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Darius, due to his age and cooperation, received 40 years with the possibility of parole after 25. But justice came too late for Bill Thompson, whose life ended not at the hands of a stranger, but by the very people he trusted most, a woman he loved, and a son he raised as his own. The story sent shockwaves through the community. A suburban tragedy that peeled back the mask of a picture-perfect family and revealed something far darker beneath. After months of trials, testimonies, media frenzies, and emotional breakdowns, the final chapter of this chilling saga arrived. Sentencing day. The courtroom was packed. Reporters crammed shoulder to shoulder. Grieving family members sat silently, and the air was thick with anticipation and dread. Vanessa Thompson stood before the judge in a gray prison jumpsuit. No longer the glamorous housewife who turned heads at neighborhood barbecues. She looked pale, thin, and hollowed out. She showed little emotion as the judge recited the charges: first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and tampering with evidence. Vanessa was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom remained silent. Even as the sentence was announced, Vanessa didn't cry. She didn't plead. She didn't apologize. Instead, she turned to gallery for one final glance, an expression not of remorse, but defeat. The once controlling mastermind now had no control at all. Darius, just 19 years old, faced a different outcome. While he had participated in the murder, his defense team painted a portrait of a young man emotionally manipulated by an older, calculating woman. In light of his age, cooperation, and guilty plea, the judge handed down a sentence of 35 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 28. Even so, the damage was done. One life ended, two wasted, and a family torn apart. The ripple effects didn't stop at the sentencing. Vanessa's case ignited debates across the country about power dynamics, manipulation, and emotional abuse. How much responsibility does a young adult bear when seduced and coerced by someone older and more experienced? Was Darius a killer or a victim himself? True crime enthusiasts, psychologists, and even sociologists weighed in. Several books were written about the case, including Behind Her Smile, the Vanessa Thompson story, which spent weeks on bestseller lists. Professors used the case in criminology and psychology courses to explore the blurred lines between victim and perpetrator. In prison, Vanessa reportedly became reclusive. She refused interviews, declined visitors, and spent most of her time in the prison library. Other inmates reportedly called her the Widowmaker, a nickname that underscored her role in orchestrating the murder of her husband with surgical precision. Darius, meanwhile, struggled behind bars. According to one leaked report, he attempted to take his own life 6 months into his sentence. He survived, but it sparked outrage. Some argued he deserved compassion. Others said it was simply the weight of guilt crashing down on a killer who finally understood the cost of his actions. And what of the children? The 2 Thompson kids, now orphans in every sense of the word, were adopted by relatives out of state. Their names changed. Their history sealed. A judge ruled that they should be shielded from media attention to give them a chance at something like a normal life. But normal would never be possible. They will grow up knowing their mother seduced a teenage boy, plotted to murder their father, and destroyed their family in the process. That legacy can't be erased. It's written in headlines, court transcripts, and whispered retellings. This story of obsession, betrayal, and murder ends not with justice, but with scars. Scars that stretch across lives, families, and a quiet suburban neighborhood that will never look the same again. When the final verdict was read, and the last courtroom door shut behind Vanessa Thompson and Darius, the story didn't fade away. If anything, it erupted into something bigger, something much darker. The public's reaction was volcanic. Social media exploded. Hashtags like hashtag Vanessa the Manipulator, hashtag Justice for Greg, and hashtag Boy to Murder trended for weeks. The nation was fixated, tore between shock and morbid fascination. People couldn't stop talking about how an everyday suburban housewife, stylish, seemingly harmless, had orchestrated the murder of her husband using a boy young enough to be her son. It was like a Lifetime movie come to life. TV networks scrambled to produce dramatized documentaries. Streaming platforms released multi-part series within months. A popular podcast titled Seduction in Silence devoted a full season to the case, featuring interviews with neighbors, legal experts, and even anonymous inmates who served time with Vanessa. But the fascination wasn't just with the crime. It was with the psychology. Experts weighed in on daytime talk shows and news panels. Some called Vanessa a textbook narcissist. Others label her a sexual predator who exploited a vulnerable teen. Forensic psychologists broke down the power dynamics, dissecting every text message, every manipulative phrase. Every moment Darius was slowly reeled like a fish on a line. And still, others pointed out a disturbing double standard. What if the genders had been reversed? What if a 35-year-old man had seduced a 19-year-old girl, convinced her to murder his wife, and discarded her afterward, the outrage would have been swift and universal. Yet in Vanessa's case, some online communities disturbingly romanticize the affair, calling her a woman taking control or a victim of a loveless marriage. That sparked a second wave of anger. Survivors of abuse and manipulation stepped forward. They flooded forums and comment sections, telling their stories of grooming, of gaslighting, of being led down dark paths by older, more dominant partners. For them, the Vanessa Thompson case was entertainment. It was trauma wrapped in headlines. Neighborhoods also changed. The once quiet cul-de-sac where the Thompsons lived saw a rise in visitors. People drove by, snapping photos of the house where Greg bled out on the floor. Real estate listings in the area plummeted. No one wanted to move into a place known nationally as the backdrop for betrayal and murder. The Thompson house was eventually sold at a massive loss. Its new owners painted the walls, changed the floors, and tried to forget what had happened there. But ghosts don't fade so easily. Locals say you can still feel it, a heaviness, a chill, as if the tragedy lingers in the walls. Even years later, the case continues to echo through pop culture. A major streaming studio is developing a fictionalized series titled The House Across the Street, loosely based on Vanessa and Darius. True crime fan conventions invite speakers who covered the trial, and criminology students still write theses analyzing the bizarre, chilling dynamics between predator and pawn. But behind all the media, all the headlines, all the noise, there's the truth. A father was murdered, a family was shattered, and two lives, one manipulated and one malevolent, were forever lost to the shadows of their choices. What began as a torrid affair in a quiet neighborhood spiraled into a cultural lightning rod, a mirror held up to society's darkest fascinations with sex, control, and the ease with which evil can wear a familiar, smiling face.